The morning light touched the predator colony softly. Dew still clung to the tall red grass, and the small cubs played in the open space near the nursery. 3 of them, Vec, Laura, and Tan, were the most curious of all. While the others chased each other or rolled in the dirt, these 3 liked to explore. They always looked for things buried under stones or hidden in the sand, hoping to find something from the old times. That morning, Vec's paw hit something hard. It didn't feel like a stone. When he brushed the dirt away, a small silver piece shone back at him. It was smooth, cool, and unlike anything they had seen. He picked it up carefully. It was shaped like a small stick, but one side was cracked and blue dust covered the edge. "What is it?" Laura asked, her eyes wide. Tan leaned closer. "Maybe it's a part of a weapon," he guessed. But it didn't smell like metal from their tools. It smelled old, like the air around the forgotten ruins where humans once lived. They called to their caretaker, a tired elder who was watching them from the shade. "We found something," Vec said proudly, holding the object up. The caretaker looked at it once, then shook his head. "Just human trash," he said. "Leave it. It's nothing but broken memory." But the cubs didn't drop it. There was something strange about it, something gentle. It wasn't sharp, and it didn't hum like a machine. When the sunlight hit it, it reflected softly, like it was made for hands smaller and softer than theirs. Vec turned it around in his claws, pressing the small button near the tip. A faint click came from inside. The cubs jumped a little. "It's alive!" Tan whispered. Laura giggled. "It's not alive, silly." But maybe it was something important. They sat together, passing it around, wondering what humans used it for. Their kind had many stories about humans. Some said they were monsters who destroyed worlds. Others said they were dreamers who built stars. But to the cubs, the truth didn't matter right now. They were holding a mystery, and that was enough to make their hearts race. A soft wind blew across the field. Vec rubbed the object on the ground to clean it. Suddenly, a streak of faded blue appeared where it touched the dirt. The cubs gasped. "Did you see that?" Laura said. "It left a mark." They tried again. Another faint blue line showed up. The cubs looked at each other, eyes shining. It was the first time they had ever seen color come from a tool. "It draws," Tan said, laughing. "Humans made a toy that draws." "Maybe it wasn't a toy," Vec said slowly. He remembered hearing old stories about how humans used marks to share thoughts, to teach, to dream. Maybe this was how they did it. The caretaker called them back inside, but they didn't move right away. Vec held the pen, though he didn't know that's what it was, and whispered, "Maybe they weren't just destroyers." The others nodded. They could almost imagine it. Humans sitting somewhere, using this strange stick to create words. Pictures, maybe even hope, before leaving. Vec tucked the object into a small pouch of grass and tied it around his neck. "Let's keep it safe," he said. The sun climbed higher, lighting the dusty ground where the pen had been hidden for years. None of them knew it yet, but this tiny discovery, this broken, forgotten pen, would change how their people saw humanity forever. For now, it was just 3 young cubs and a small piece of the past, shining quietly in their hands, waiting to tell its story. The cubs ran back to their den, the strange object held carefully in Vec's paws. The den was small and warm, built into the side of a rock hill. Inside, old scraps of fabric, shiny stones, and bits of metal filled the corners. These were the cubs' treasures, little pieces of the past they loved to collect. Vec placed the new find in the center of the floor. All 3 crouched around it, staring like it was a rare gem. The light from the den's small opening fell right on it, making the silver surface shine softly. Up close, it looked even stranger. A crack ran down the middle, and from that crack came a thin line of dried blue liquid. It looked almost like blood, but it was too bright, too smooth. Laura poked it gently with a stick. "It's dry," she said. "Maybe it used to flow before." Tan tilted his head. "It doesn't make any sound. No hum, no light, nothing." He pressed one end against the stone floor. "Maybe it's broken," Vec nodded slowly. "Maybe, but humans didn't make useless things. It has to do something. For a while, they just watched it. Their world was full of loud, glowing tools that buzzed or blinked, but this thing was silent. It didn't demand power or respond to touch. It felt peaceful, as if it belonged to a slower time. Laura picked it up again, turning it carefully. "Look here," she said, pointing at a faint line of letters scratched into the side. They were half covered with dirt, but still readable. Pilot G2. What does that mean? Tan asked. None of them could read human text well. They had learned a few symbols in school, but most human language was long forgotten. Maybe it's the name of the person who owned it, Vec guessed. Or maybe it's what humans called the object. He said the word slowly, tasting the sound. Pilot. G2. The name felt strange and strong, like it carried a story of its own. Laura smiled. I like it. It sounds brave. Tan tapped the object again, but nothing happened. No spark, no vibration, no life. If it doesn't work, maybe it's just a decoration, he said. But Vec shook his head. Humans didn't waste metal for decorations. He leaned closer and whispered, they made things with purpose. They tried everything they could think of, shaking it, pressing both ends, even holding it near the small fire pit. Nothing changed. Still, they couldn't look away. The cracked middle showed tiny gears and a thin tube inside. It looked delicate, made for small, careful hands, not for claws. Laura touched the dried blue stain again and rubbed it on the wall. A faint color smudge appeared. Her eyes widened. Look! It makes marks! The cubs leaned closer. The blue mark wasn't very clear, but it was enough to make them gasp. So, maybe it's for drawing? She said softly. Vec's heart raced. Or writing, he whispered. The word felt almost magical. I heard the old stories. Humans used to write. They used these to make symbols, to talk to others without sound. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The den felt quiet, heavy with thought. They were holding something that once belonged to a world of builders. Dreamers, the same species everyone said was gone forever. Tan finally said, if this was theirs, then maybe they left a part of themselves in it. Vec looked down at the cracked pen, at the soft glint of silver and the blue marks on the wall, and nodded. Then we should keep it safe, he said. It's not just human trash, Laura smiled. No, it's a piece of their story. They wrapped the object in a scrap of cloth and placed it gently on a flat stone near the fire. The faint blue color on the wall still shone in the dim light, like a quiet voice from the past whispering through time. The cubs didn't understand everything about what they had found. Not yet. But deep inside, they felt something new. A sense that this little broken thing wasn't just metal. It was memory. And that night, as they fell asleep beside it, the pen lay silently between them. Small, cracked, and still powerful enough to make them wonder who the humans really were. The next morning, the cubs woke up early. The silver object, the Pilot G2, as it said on its side, was still resting on the flat stone near the fire. The faint blue stain on the wall had dried, but it still caught the light. Every time one of them looked at it, they felt that same strange pull inside, like it was asking them to understand. Laura was the first to speak. We need to find out what it is, she said, brushing sleep from her eyes. We can't just guess forever, Vec nodded. Someone in the colony must know. Humans lived here once, right? Maybe someone remembers their things. Tan grabbed the wrapped pen carefully, and together they left the den. Outside, the day was bright, the air filled with soft dust from the open plains. They walked past the other cubs playing, past the caretakers cleaning tools, until they reached the larger part of the colony, where the elders lived. Their first stop was an older worker named Dren. He was fixing metal nets and didn't look up when they approached. What is it? He asked, voice rough. Vec held up the pen. Do you know what this is? It has human words on it, Dren snorted. Human junk, he said, barely glancing at it. You'll find thousands like that near the old cities. Worthless. But what did it do? Laura pressed. Nothing important. Maybe decoration? Humans made too many useless things before they destroyed themselves. He waved them off and went back to his work. The cubs walked away, disappointed, but not defeated. Next, they found Mira, a soft-spoken teacher who kept the younger ones busy during storm days. She squinted at the object and shrugged. A pen, maybe? I've seen drawings of them in old data books. What does a pen do? Tan asked. She smiled gently. It makes marks on flat things. That's all? That's all? Lura frowned. But that's too simple. Mira laughed a little. Humans love simple things. They use small tools to do big things. But if you really want to know, ask Elder Garla. He studies old human things. He'll tell you more than I can. So the cubs hurried across the settlement toward the stone hall where the oldest elder lived. Garla was sitting by a low fire, his fur grayed with age, his eyes calm and deep. He looked up when he heard their steps. Well now, he said softly, what brings 3 bright eyes to an old den? Vec bowed slightly, showing the object. Elder, we found this near the nursery. They say it's a human thing. A pen! At the word pen, Garla's expression changed. He reached out carefully, taking it from Vec's paws. His fingers trembled a little as he turned it in the light. Ah, he said quietly. It's been a long time since I've seen one of these. You know what it is? Tan asked eagerly. Garla nodded. Yes, the humans use this to create worlds with symbols. The cubs looked at each other, confused. Symbols? Lura repeated. Words, Garla said, tapping the pen lightly. They used it to think, to imagine, to remember. With tools like this, they built stories, plans, and dreams, all on flat sheets of paper. To them, this was power. Vex stared at the small object, amazed. They used it to think? The elder smiled. Yes. The humans believed that writing something down gave it life. If you wrote a promise, it became real. If you wrote a dream, it had a chance to grow. The cubs fell silent. For a moment, the fire crackled softly between them. They were strange, Garla continued, but not foolish. They built great things, sometimes too great. But this, he placed the pen gently back in Vec's paws. This is a reminder that not everything powerful shines or makes noise. Some power comes quietly, Lura whispered. Like words. The elder nodded. Exactly. Remember that. When they left his den, the world outside looked different. The sun felt warmer, the wind softer. Vec held the pen tighter in his claws. It wasn't just an old object anymore. It was a key, a link to what humans once were, and as they walked home, all 3 cubs felt something new growing inside them. Not fear, not pride, but curiosity. The kind that starts stories worth remembering. That night the cubs couldn't sleep. Garla's words kept echoing in their minds. Humans used it to think. The small pen lay between them, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. The silver body caught the glow from the fire pit. Every few moments, one of them reached out and touched it, as if afraid it might vanish. Finally, Vec whispered, "We should try to fix it." Lura's ears perked up. Fix it? But we don't even know how it works. That's what makes it exciting, Vec said, eyes bright. If humans use this to make words, maybe we can make it work again. Tan sat up, tail twitching. I saw something once, he said. Old human videos in the archives. They fixed things with their hands, not tools. They used tape. Lots of it. They all looked at each other and then at the pen. The decision was made without another word. The cubs gathered around the fire and spread their small collection of supplies, a bit of clear adhesive tape, a dull knife, a broken piece of cloth, and some tiny tools they had borrowed from the repair shed. Vec held the pen steady while Lura tore off a strip of tape with her teeth. Careful, she said, wrapping the cracked middle. If humans used this, it must be delicate. The tape stuck unevenly, bubbling in some places, tearing in others. They didn't care. Each strip made them feel closer to the people who once used such things. Tan leaned closer, peering at the pen's tip. Maybe the blue stuff inside needs to come out, he said, pressing gently. A small dot of ink appeared. They all gasped. It's still alive, Lura whispered. Encouraged, they pressed harder. Ink splattered across the ground, over their claws and onto the walls. The den filled with laughter. Look at us, Tan said, waving his stained paw. We're artists now. Lura giggled, making dots on the stone floor. This must be how humans did it. Vec couldn't stop smiling. For the first time, he felt connected to something bigger than their small world, something ancient and alive. "No," he said softly. "They didn't just make spots. They made meaning." They tried again, pressing the pen tip carefully on a flat piece of stone. This time, a thin blue line appeared, smoother than before. They froze. The air seemed to hold still around them. "It draws," Tan whispered. Vec traced another line, slower. Then he made a small curve. "This is how it begins," he said quietly. This is how humans thought. Before long, their den was covered with blue lines, dots, and crooked shapes. Some looked like letters from the old human language. Others were just playful marks. Ink covered their fur and faces, but they didn't care. When the pen stopped working for a moment, they shook it gently, like they had seen humans do in the old recordings. Then it worked again, leaving fresh trails of color. They spent hours there, laughing, trying, failing, and trying again. The smell of ink filled the den. The fire burned low, but their energy didn't fade. Every mark they made felt like a message to someone far away, a whisper that humans were not forgotten. At one point, Laura sat back, breathing hard. "Do you think humans felt the same when they used it?" she asked. Vec nodded slowly. Maybe they felt proud. Maybe they felt alive? When they finally stopped, the pen was covered in tape, smudged with fingerprints and ink. It looked nothing like it did before, but somehow it looked more complete. The cubs sat together, staring at their messy creation. Blue marks glowed faintly in the firelight like stars scattered across the walls. Tan smiled, tired but happy. "We fixed it," he said. "Not perfectly, but like humans would." Vec looked at the pen resting between them, its body patched and clumsy, but full of life. "Maybe that's the point," he whispered. "Humans didn't wait for things to be perfect. They just made them work." Outside, the wind hummed through the rocks, carrying the sound of laughter and discovery. In that small den, 3 cubs had done something more than repair a broken tool. They had touched a piece of what it meant to be human. The night outside was quiet, and the little den glowed with the soft orange light of the fire. The cubs sat close together, the repaired pen lying on the ground between them. It looked fragile, wrapped in uneven strips of tape and stained with ink. But to them, it wasn't just a broken object anymore. It felt alive, waiting for something. Vec held up a thin piece of old data paper they had found weeks ago near the ruins. It was rough and yellowed, with faded symbols printed on one side. He placed it carefully in front of him. "Maybe this is what humans used it on," he said softly. Laura's eyes sparkled. "Let's try." Tan leaned forward, his claws still stained blue. "Careful. Don't break it now." Vec took a deep breath and pressed the tip of the pen gently against the paper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a faint blue line appeared. The cubs froze. The sound of the fire faded away. The whole world seemed to pause as they stared at the mark. It wasn't much, just a shaky line, but it was proof that something lost to time still worked. Laura gasped. "It's real," she whispered. "It really works." Tan laughed, his tail flicking with excitement. "You did it, Vec! You made it alive again!" Vec stared at the tiny line, hardly believing it. "No," he said quietly. "We did." The cubs gathered around the paper. Vec drew another line, smoother this time, and then a small loop. Laura reached out and took the pen next, pressing the tip down carefully. She drew a circle, then another, then a wobbly shape that looked a bit like a paw. Tan cheered. "You're making pictures." Laura giggled. "No, I'm making art." Ink smudged across their claws as they passed the pen back and forth. Circles turned into waves, lines became shapes, and soon the paper was full of messy blue marks. Some were dark and bold. Others were soft and fading. But each one felt important, as if they were rediscovering something ancient. Vec sat back, his chest full of wonder. "So this is what humans did," he said. "They made marks to say something." Laura looked at the page, her voice quiet. Even when they were gone, their tools still wanted to speak. For a while, no one said anything. They just stared at what they had created. The little paper looked like chaos, but beautiful chaos. Tan broke the silence. What if we tried to make symbols like the old ones? You know the ones we saw on the walls near the ruins? Vec nodded eagerly. Yes. Maybe if we copy them, we can learn what they meant. They worked for hours, their laughter filling the den. The paper ran out, so they drew on flat stones and scraps of old fabric. Blue ink covered everything, their fur, their paws, even their noses. Each mark felt like a spark, a small connection to something greater than themselves. At one point, Lura looked at her stained claws and smiled. Do you think humans laughed like this when they made things? Vec thought for a moment. Maybe. I think they felt the same. They wanted to understand the world, and when they couldn't, they made their own. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the rocks. The cubs didn't notice. They were too busy creating. When the fire finally burned low, they lay down beside the paper, their faces tired but happy. The pen rested between them, still faintly glowing blue under the light. Vec whispered, "This is how it started for them, isn't it?" "Just one line," Lura nodded sleepily. "And look what they made after that. Stories, worlds, everything." The cubs drifted off to sleep, surrounded by their messy art. The den smelled of ink and smoke, and on the wall above them the blue lines shone faintly like stars. None of them realized it, but that night, in a small den on a distant world, the spirit of human creation had flickered alive again, not through machines or great inventions, but through curiosity, laughter, and the simple joy of drawing a line. The morning light crept slowly into the den, brushing across the floor that was now covered in blue marks. Circles, lines, and strange shapes glowed faintly under the soft rays of the sun. The cubs were still half asleep, lying in a heap beside the fire pit. The air smelled of ink and smoke, a mix that felt both new and ancient at the same time. Outside, the colony was waking up. The sound of footsteps and quiet chatter echoed through the rocks. Elder Garla often walked the paths early, checking on the younger ones and greeting the workers. That day, his slow walk led him past the small den where the cubs lived. He stopped when he noticed the faint blue marks on the stones outside. His old eyes narrowed with curiosity. The lines looked familiar, not the rough scratches of claws or tools, but careful strokes, smooth and deliberate. He followed the trail inside. The cubs woke up to the soft crunch of his steps. Vec sat up first, eyes wide. "Elder Garla!" The others scrambled to their feet, trying to wipe the ink off their fur, but it was too late. The elder's gaze swept across the room. The scattered stones, the blue-stained paws, the small silver pen lying at the center of it all. For a moment, he said nothing. Lura lowered her head. "We were just trying to fix it," she said softly. Tan added quickly, "We didn't mean to make a mess." But Garla didn't scold them. Instead, he walked slowly to the pen, bending down to pick it up. The tape crackled under his touch. The ink had dried along its edges, but when he turned it in his hand, the metal still shone faintly in the morning light. "You made it work again," he said quietly. Vec nodded, unsure if that was good or bad. "We think it draws. We used it on old paper and stones." Garla smiled faintly. "I can see that." He looked around the den, his eyes tracing the lines on the walls. Each one told its own little story. Crooked shapes, uneven letters, and marks that almost looked like old human writing. He lowered himself onto the ground beside them. "Tell me," he said, "what did you feel when you made these?" The cubs exchanged quick glances. Lura spoke first. "It felt peaceful. Like we were doing something important even if we didn't know what." Tan nodded. "And it was fun. It felt alive." Vec looked down at his blue-stained claws. "It felt like thinking. Like the more I drew, the more I understood something I couldn't say out loud." The elder listened quietly, the firelight dancing in his eyes. After a moment, he placed the pen back down between them. "Now you understand," he whispered. The cubs leaned closer. "Understand what?" Vec asked. Garla looked at the small paper filled with blue lines. His voice was soft but carried the weight of years. "You understand why the humans were feared. Not because they were strong, but because they could build before they conquered. The words hung in the air. He pointed at their drawings. They created before they destroyed. They dreamed before they acted. Every mark, every word, every plan, they built their world one thought at a time. And when they finally turned to fight, their minds were already years ahead. Laura's eyes widened. So this little pen, it was part of that? Yes, Garla said. To most, it's just metal and ink. But to the humans, it was a tool of creation. With things like this, they made stories, designs, hopes, and sometimes, even peace. The cubs sat silently, absorbing every word. After a while, the elder stood. Keep it safe, he said. Not because it's powerful, but because it reminds us what power truly is. He turned to leave, then paused at the entrance. One day when you draw again, remember, creation is the first act of strength. That's what the humans taught, even without meaning to. When he left, the den felt quiet but full of light. The cubs looked at the pen, then at their messy drawings. Vex smiled faintly. We didn't just fix it, he said. We learned from it. And in that moment, the pen didn't seem like an old relic anymore. It felt like a teacher, one that had given them a lesson no voice could ever explain. By the next morning, everyone in the colony had heard the story. It started as a whisper between the caretakers near the nursery about the cubs who brought a dead human thing back to life. Then it reached the workers at the metal yard, and by noon, even the guards at the outer walls were talking about it. The tale changed a little with every voice that passed it along. Some said the cubs had discovered a human tool that painted on its own. Others said they had uncovered a forgotten weapon. But by the time it reached the elders' council, the story had grown into something far deeper, that 3 young cubs had made a human artifact live again. When the cubs stepped out of their den, still half covered in dried blue ink, all eyes turned to them. Their paws, their fur, even the tips of their tails were stained, but they didn't try to hide it. They walked through the colony with quiet pride, the repaired pen hanging around Vex's neck. A group of workers stopped them near the main square. One of them, an older female with a kind face, crouched down and said softly, "So it's true? You made the human tool work again?" Vex nodded, holding up the pen. "It's not a weapon," he said. "It makes marks, lines, words, maybe." The worker smiled faintly. "Just like the old stories." The others leaned closer, their eyes shining with curiosity. Laura showed them the scrap of paper they had used, now covered in circles, lines, and clumsy symbols. "We drew these," she said proudly. "It makes you think somehow. Like it wants to tell you something." The adults didn't laugh. They didn't scold them for playing with relics. They just stared, quiet and thoughtful. It had been so long since anyone had spoken of humans without fear or bitterness. By evening, the cubs were invited to the gathering hall. The elders sat in a circle, the firelight flickering on their faces. The cubs placed the pen on a flat stone in the center. It looked small and fragile, yet somehow powerful. Elder Garla spoke first. "You all see this," he said, his voice calm. "A tool made by those who came before us. For generations, we told ourselves they were monsters, beings who destroyed worlds for their gain. But look at this. Does this look like something made for destruction?" The crowd was silent. He pointed at the drawings. "No, this was made for creation, for thought, for sharing. The humans didn't only take, they gave the universe something else, something rare. They gave it imagination." A low murmur spread through the hall. The adults looked at one another, unsure what to feel. Many of them had grown up hearing stories of war, fire, and ruin. But now, seeing the blue ink stains on the cubs' paws, something inside them shifted. One of the younger teachers spoke softly. "Maybe we only remembered their mistakes. Maybe we forgot what made them great." Garla nodded. They were both destroyers and dreamers, but it was the dreamers who shaped their world. It was the builders who made their power possible. The pen glimmered faintly in the firelight, the tape wrapped around it shining like silver thread. Laura stepped forward and said shyly, "We didn't mean to make anything important. We just wanted to understand them." Garla smiled. "And you did more than that. You reminded us who they truly were." For a moment, no one spoke. The fire cracked softly. The pen sat between them all, quiet, simple, yet holding a history that words could barely touch. From that night on, the pen became more than a relic. It became a symbol of curiosity, of creation, of the human spark that once filled the stars. The cub's drawings were placed on the wall of the hall, not as art, but as a reminder. Humans weren't just destroyers. They were makers, thinkers, storytellers, and as the colony slept that night, a gentle feeling spread through their hearts, a sense of connection, as if the humans who were long gone were still watching, proud that someone remembered not their power, but their hope. A week later, the colony gathered inside the learning hall. The walls were smooth stone, lined with carvings of history, the stories of their kind, their battles, their victories. But that day, something new was being added, something small, yet unlike anything before. At the center of the hall stood a clear case made of glass. Inside it rested the old silver pen, wrapped in layers of tape, still faintly marked with blue ink. It looked ordinary at first glance, but everyone knew it wasn't. Around it stood the three cubs, Vec, Lura, and Tan, their fur brushed clean, though faint traces of blue still colored their claws. They couldn't quite wash away what they had created, and they didn't want to. The elders sat nearby, and the rest of the colony filled the room in silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. Every eye was fixed on that small pen, the first human artifact that had lived again. Elder Garla stepped forward. His voice was calm but full of pride. This pen, he said, was once a simple tool, but in these young ones' hands, it became a bridge between what was forgotten and what still lives in us. He turned to the cubs. You reminded us that creation is a kind of strength. That knowledge and imagination can last longer than any weapon. He motioned for them to place the pen in its new home. Vec lifted it carefully, holding it as though it might still breathe. Together, the three cubs lowered it into the glass case and stepped back. Below it, a small metal plaque had been placed. The words were carved with care. They wrote their worlds into existence. We only live in the echoes. The hall stayed silent for a long moment. The words seemed to hang in the air like a whisper from another time. Then someone began to clap softly. Another joined, and soon the hall was filled with applause, not loud or wild, but steady and full of meaning. It wasn't just for the cubs. It was for the humans who had once existed, for their dreams, their mistakes, and the legacy they had left behind. After that day, things began to change in the colony. The learning hall, once a place only for hunting lessons and survival training, started to welcome new teachings. Young ones were given small stones to carve, sticks to draw with, scraps of old data paper to write on. They were taught to make things, to imagine, to ask why instead of just how. Elder Garla began each lesson with the same words. The humans built before they conquered. We will build before we hunt. At first, some of the older hunters didn't understand. They said the young were wasting time with marks and drawings. But when they saw how the cubs' inventions helped fix tools, design shelters, and even plan hunts more safely, they began to see the truth. The pen had become more than a symbol. It had become a seed, a small idea planted in their hearts, that creation and understanding were as powerful as claws and strength. Months passed. The cubs grew taller and wiser. The ink stains on their fur faded, but the memory stayed bright. Sometimes they would visit the learning hall and stand before the glass case. The pen never moved, yet every time they looked at it, they felt something stir inside. Curiosity, pride, and a quiet connection to the humans who had once walked the same ground. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Vec whispered, "They're gone, but not really. Every time we make something new, they live again." Lura nodded. "We're part of their story now," and Tan smiled. "No," he said softly. "We're writing our own, just like they did." Outside, the wind carried their laughter across the fields, mixing with the rustling grass. The stars began to appear, bright and endless, the same stars humans once looked up to and dreamed beneath. In the quiet glow of the learning hall, The pen rested in its glass case, untouched but never forgotten, a small, silent promise that the spirit of creation would never fade.